I stood at the dining table holding a birthday cake. Strawberry frosting, 7 candles, each one trembling in the draft from the ceiling fan. It was for my granddaughter, Lily. Before I could set it down, my daughter-in-law, Caitlin, said flatly, "You don't need to bring that, Eleanor. Guests don't bring cakes to family dinners." Her voice had that careful edge, polite enough to sound harmless, sharp enough to cut. Ryan, my son, didn't look at me for long. He just nodded and said, "She's right, Mom. You're a guest here. Don't make it awkward." The candles flickered, unsure whether to hold their flame or die out. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel suddenly visible, then invisible all at once. I stood there in what used to be my own dining room, holding a cake I was no longer welcome to share. No one met my eyes. Caitlin picked up her phone. Ryan poured himself another drink. Lily looked between us, confused, and whispered, "Grandma, is it your cake?" I smiled, the kind of smile that keeps a heart from breaking in front of a child. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "It's everyone's cake." But as I stood there with the frosting melting under the warmth of the candles, I realized it wasn't. It was the last thing I would ever bring to that house. How could they do this to me? If you want to know how I reached this moment, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and stay with me. Because this isn't just my story. It's every mother's story. The kind that begins with love and ends with silence. My name is Eleanor Brown, 67 years old, from Charleston, South Carolina. For 30 years, I taught English at a small public high school, where the walls smelled faintly of chalk and Lysol, and the students' laughter filled the halls long after the final bell. I retired in 2016, 1 year after my husband, Michael, passed away from a heart condition that came without warning. Since then, I've lived with my memories and with my son, Ryan. Ryan was always a quiet boy. When he was small, he used to line his toy cars in perfect order across the kitchen tiles, like little soldiers waiting for command. He didn't talk much, but when he smiled, it reached his eyes. I used to think he was my calm after Michael's storms of ambition and perfection. When Ryan married Caitlin, I believed I was gaining a daughter. She was polished, organized, the kind of woman who always knew where every receipt and charger cable belonged. During their first year of marriage, she would call me for recipes and send pictures of Lily, their newborn, swaddled in yellow blankets. She signed every message, "Love you, Mom." Seems impossible now, but back then I thought we were close. When Ryan lost his job during the pandemic, I didn't hesitate. I sold my car, a silver Camry I'd driven for 15 years, and cashed out my small retirement savings. The total came to $42,000. I remember the exact amount because it took me 3 decades of careful teaching and careful living to save it. "Mom," Ryan said that day, his voice breaking, "I'll pay you back. You'll always have a room here. I promise." He hugged me and I believed him. Maybe I wanted to believe him. That money paid off their mortgage for 6 months and kept food in the pantry. We started eating dinners together. I cooked most nights. Caitlin would thank me in that bright, performative tone she used when she wanted to sound generous. "You don't know how much this helps, Eleanor," she'd say. And I'd smile and reply, "That's what mothers are for." First, it truly felt like family. I woke up early to pack Lily's lunches, baked banana bread on Sundays, and took quiet joy in folding little pink socks that smelled of lavender detergent. I had a rhythm, a purpose, and a place. But slowly, almost invisibly, something changed. It began with tone. The way Caitlin's thank yous became clipped, perfunctory. The way Ryan stopped asking me to join their evening walks. One morning, I noticed the name on the mailbox had changed. Where it once read the Browns, it now read simply Ryan and Caitlin Brown. My name had disappeared like an erasure no one thought I'd notice. When I asked about it, Ryan smiled awkwardly. "Oh, Mom," he said. "It's just easier that way. Mail gets confusing." I smiled too because that's what mothers do when their hearts are bruised but still beating. I told myself it didn't matter. I still had my room. I still had them. But inside, a small unease began to hum. Quiet, persistent, like the sound of a fridge in the dark. Caitlin began rearranging the house. My old armchair, the one Michael and I bought the year Lily was born, vanished overnight. She said it didn't fit the aesthetic. My curtains were replaced with white blinds. My pantry shelf became labeled Eleanor's groceries. First, I thought it was thoughtful organization. Later, I saw it for what it was, a quiet division. One evening, Caitlin told Ryan she wanted more privacy. I overheard her through the thin wall. "She's always around, Ryan. It's like we don't have our own home." Ryan sighed, then said something I'll never forget. "She just doesn't know when to stop helping." It stung, not because it was cruel, but because it was said so casually. From that day, invitations to family dinners started getting lost. They'd eat out without telling me. The lights in the kitchen would turn off when I walked in. Sometimes I'd hear the echo of their laughter from behind a closed door and wonder when exactly I'd become the outsider. The hardest moment came when Lily, my sweet granddaughter, toddled into my room one afternoon and said, "Eleanor, Mommy says you're resting. Can I play later?" Eleanor. Not Grandma. It wasn't the child's fault. She was only repeating what she'd heard. But hearing my name in her mouth like that felt like being quietly erased from my own family. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my old teaching planner. On the first page was a note from Ryan when he was 10 years old. "You're the best mom in the world. Don't ever move away." I ran my finger over the faded ink until it smudged slightly. I wanted to believe that boy still existed somewhere inside the man across the hall. But sometimes love doesn't die. It just gets replaced by convenience. By the time April came, I'd learned to stay quiet, to make myself small. I told myself families go through phases, that maybe I was imagining things. But the truth is, love shouldn't feel like tiptoeing in your own house. I didn't know it then, but every small dismissal, every replaced curtain, every withheld invitation, every word unspoken, was building toward that night at the dinner table. The night when the cake trembled in my hands and the people I'd sacrificed everything for looked at me as if I were a stranger. And that's where this story truly begins. Not with cruelty, but with the quiet courage it takes to see what's been in front of you all along. The morning after the mailbox changed, I found a neat stack of labels on the kitchen island beside a beige marker. Pantry. Cleaning. Frozen. A final label sat off to the side in perfect block letters. Eleanor. Beside it was a single strip of blue painter's tape, already curled at the edge as if eager to stick. Caitlin said, "I'm organizing zones. It'll be easier for everyone." I nodded because arguing about tape felt childish. I took my tea back to my room. When I returned, the tape had landed on the pantry shelf I used, a little border drawn around my food like a fence for a pet. The fence grew quietly. My coffee mug, the blue one with a tiny chip on the rim, migrated to the top shelf out of Lily's reach. Fine. Safety. Then my thick wool throw disappeared from the back of the sofa. Caitlin said it collected too much lint. One afternoon I set the table early, the way I always had. Plates, forks, cloth napkins folded into a simple pocket. When they came home, Caitlin slid everything back into drawers and set 3 plates on the counter. 2 large, 1 small. She didn't look at me. "We're eating in the den," she said. "Less mess." I carried my plate to my room and didn't comment on the empty chair at the table. I told myself families evolve. I told myself I was adaptable. The story sounded noble until it began to feel like practice for vanishing. A week on, I discovered the chair itself had gone. The spot looked suddenly bright, like a scar where skin has healed but remembers the cut. I touched the wall out of habit, fingers searching for the dent the chair back had made over the years. Smooth now. Spackled. Erased. Caitlin hired a junk service, Ryan explained. "We're decluttering." I wanted to ask whether memories counted as clutter. Instead I said, "It was comfortable." Ryan shrugged. "We'll get something that fits the look." Their look meant white walls, black frames, and a curated number of objects that could be counted at a glance. I used to think order was kindness to the future. Now it felt like an audit of the past. At the grocery store, I bought a jar of strawberry jam Lily loved and set it in the refrigerator door. By evening, a small sticker had appeared on the lid. Not for her. The handwriting was neat, careful. It didn't look like anger. It looked like policy. I peeled the sticker off and washed the glue from my fingers. I told myself grown children have their ways and new families need space. But in the middle of the night, I lay awake and thought about how rules are sometimes made to avoid saying what a person is afraid to say out loud. Dinner became a schedule I learned secondhand. I would hear the garage open and close, the shuffle of takeout bags, the murmur of a television show I did not recognize. If I opened my door, the sound lowered a notch. When I closed it, The volume returned like a breath someone had been holding. I learned which floorboards groaned and which could carry me silently. I stopped hanging my towel on the bathroom hook because Caitlin preferred a clean line. Lily adjusted with the ease of children. She still climbed into my lap with storybooks, still curled her fingers around mine when we crossed the driveway. But she also repeated phrases Caitlin favored. "We don't do that anymore. That's not our routine. Mom says boundaries are healthy." The last sentence made me smile, then made me sad. Boundaries are healthy. They just shouldn't be used as walls. One Saturday, Caitlin organized a closet refresh. Piles formed on the bed. Keep, donate, storage. My winter coats were moved to the trunk. "We're short on space," she said. "Storage is fine," I said. "But please don't put cedar near the blue scarf." Caitlin blinked as if I'd spoken in code. "We'll do what's best for the fabric." That night, the scarf wasn't in the trunk or the closet. I found it folded into a cube under the bathroom sink, absorbing the smell of bleach. I carried it back to my room and sat with it in my lap, the soft wool warming under my hands, a small defiance no one could see but me. The changes gathered like lint in a corner. Harmless alone, unmissable together. A bill would arrive and vanish before I could open it. Caitlin switched the Wi-Fi password and said the new one was in the family chat I wasn't added to. Ryan installed a lock on the liquor cabinet, though the only thing I ever took from it was the dust cloth. When I asked about the spring neighborhood potluck, they said, "It's for young families this year." The home I tended answered me in closed doors and revised calendars. I kept cooking in smaller portions. I made soup and labeled it for anyone. I left slices of banana bread on the counter with a note that said, "Still warm." Sometimes the plate came back empty. Sometimes it didn't move at all. On those nights I ate my slice at my desk and listened to the faint, constant hum that lives in every house. A refrigerator, a vent, electricity whispering through walls. It sounded like endurance. Then the mail arrived with a thin envelope addressed to Ryan Brown or current resident. I set it on the hall table. Later it had been moved to my door with a sticky note. "Not yours." The ink was Ryan's. It wasn't cruel. It was efficient. Efficiency is the language of unspoken withdrawal. The first crack was not a fight. It was a pattern practiced until it held. I felt myself becoming background, useful when needed, inconvenient when visible. One evening I caught my reflection in the dark window over the sink. A woman holding a dish towel, face softened by the glass into something nearly transparent. I stood there listening to the dishwasher cycle begin, the rinse rattle like distant rain. I told myself out loud very quietly, "You still exist." The words sounded strange, but they steadied me like the first hand on a railing in a long staircase down. The house learned to answer me with little corrections. If I left a window cracked for air, I returned to find it sealed tight and the latch turned neatly horizontal. If I set a spoon to cool, it migrated to a tray. Nothing was dramatic. It was kinder than conflict and colder than kindness. I tried to keep my routines. Each morning I brewed a single cup in my chipped blue mug, listened for the first gulls, and wiped the crumbs from the counter until it felt like a clean slate. I ironed my blouse for school volunteering. I walked twice around the block, past azaleas that smelled faintly of pepper after rain. Then the calendar shifted. "We're doing dinners later," Caitlin announced, sliding a shared Google schedule across the island. I wasn't on the invite. The squares filled with entries: Pilates, preschool showcase, couples night, networking. There was a new recurring appointment on Sundays, family reset 6 to 8 p.m. I planned my evenings around their resets. Once on a Thursday I set out spaghetti at 5:30. Ryan came in after 6, eyebrows lifted. "Oh Mom, we actually ordered in." "For all of us?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He looked apologetic and relieved at once. "You've been on your feet. Take a night off." The bag held exactly 2 entrees and 1 kid's meal. I put my pot away and told myself boiling water could wait. By March, I stopped watering the hydrangeas at the edge of the yard. Caitlin had hired a landscaper who trimmed the bushes into obedient spheres. The blossoms used to look like clouds. Now they looked like helmets. "Curb appeal," she said. I wondered when beauty began to require submission. There were whispers behind the den door. A word like budget, then tighter, then boundaries again. My name surfaced lightly the way a leaf floats past a pier and you aren't sure whether it touched the post or only skimmed the shadow. One afternoon I returned from the library to find a new Wi-Fi name on my phone, Brown Home. The old network, Harbor Lane, was gone. When I asked Ryan, he said, we had to change the plan, security. Caitlin has everything streamlined. He didn't offer the password. I opened a book and pretended the page edges were roads I could walk. I listened. Lily loved stickers. She brought me a sheet printed with little suns and asked, "Can I put one on your door?" I told her yes. She smoothed it carefully above my doorknob and whispered, "So I can always find you." That night, the sun sticker had been removed. In its place was a slim brass hook for a do not disturb tag. No one had hung a tag yet. The hook said enough. I kept my contributions practical. I paid the gas bill when it came early. I refilled the laundry detergent, folded towels into thirds because that's how they fit the shelf, and lined up the spice jars with the labels forward. Caitlin walked in, surveyed the order, and said, "We're moving to jars with black lids next month." I took that as a thank you and let it go. The invitations to neighbors dwindled. When the Adamses dropped by with a lemon cake, Caitlin met them at the door and accepted it with both hands like a ceremony. "We're keeping things simple," she told them, smiling. They didn't step in. I cut a sliver later and wrapped the rest neatly, labeling it in small letters, "For everyone." The cake box wandered to the garage freezer and never returned. The hardest part was the invisible choosing. When Lily had a preschool recital, I ironed my floral dress and pinned my hair. At the last minute, an email landed. Due to limited seating, only parents were allowed. I stayed home. That evening, Lily climbed onto my bed with glitter on her cheeks and sang her song in a whisper so soft I had to hold my breath to hear it. "You were wonderful," I said. She pressed a program into my hand, the edges smudged with pink crayon. I kept it in my drawer for weeks. Money threaded through these days like a thin wire. Never in sight, always conducting. I noticed gas receipts from Ryan's work trips that did not lead to work. A new stroller appeared, sleeker than a car. "Gift from our friends," Caitlin said. She began mentioning the word goals. "Our 5-year goals, our equity goals, our goals for balance." She used the word ours as if it were an address and I had no key. The first week of April, the air turned humid and soft. Ryan stood in the hall and said, "We're thinking of reallocating rooms. Lily's getting bigger." He didn't look at my door. Caitlin added, "It's just logistics." I pictured the blue tape on the pantry, the way a border once drawn is easier to redraw. "Let me know what you decide," I answered. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was not. I started keeping a small notebook in my pocket, the kind I used in homeroom to tally hall passes. Not to build a case, just to keep things straight. April 3rd. Mailbox name still Brown. April 9th. Password change. April 12th. Dinner reset. April 14th. Lily said Eleanor and then blushed. April 18th. A conversation behind the garage, Ryan's voice frayed. "I can't keep doing this," he said. Caitlin answered even, "Then don't." The night before the birthday, I baked the strawberry cake in 2 layers and set it on the cooling rack. The kitchen smelled like school bake sales and Saturdays. I piped 7 careful swirls and pressed tiny sugar pearls in a circle, the way my mother taught me to make a cake feel like an occasion. I placed the box by the door with matches and a lighter, because sometimes the wind on Harbor Lane argued with fire. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of the dark dining room. The new table was long and pale, a plank the color of winter light. 3 candles waited in a tray and used. My reflection hovered in the glass of the built-in hutch, a small figure, hands folded, as if listening for instructions. "Tomorrow will be simple," I told myself. A cake, a song, a wish. But the house had been practicing another script. I just hadn't learned my line yet. April 29th, 2023. The morning after the cake. The sun came through the blinds in thin, obedient lines striping the floorboards. The silence felt rehearsed. From somewhere down the hall came the quick rhythm of Caitlin's heels, then the sound of the front door shutting, a decisive click like punctuation. Ryan's voice followed, lower, hurried, unfamiliar in tone. I thought maybe he'd come to speak with me about last night, to soften it, perhaps even apologize. But when I stepped into the kitchen, the only sound was the refrigerator's hum and a folded envelope resting on the counter beside my cup. My name wasn't written. Only 2 words. Guest stay concluded. For a moment I didn't understand. It looked like an error, something meant for a hotel. I opened it. Inside was a single page typed neatly. Dear Eleanor, this arrangement has become emotionally unsustainable. We need to create space for our nuclear family. We appreciate your contributions and support, but as of May 1st, we'll be transitioning to independent living. We'll arrange temporary accommodation for you until you can find something more permanent. With respect, Ryan and Caitlin Brown. I read it twice, my eyes tracing the symmetry of their names. Husband and wife aligned like signatures on a mortgage. There was no mention of love, no hint of the promises made when I handed over $42,000 2 years earlier. Just arrangement, unsustainable, transition. Words meant to sound professional instead of cruel. I folded the letter once, set it down carefully beside the kettle, and watched the steam curl above the spout. I didn't cry. Teachers learn to stay composed. It's an old reflex. At 10:13 a.m., I left for the grocery store. I thought if I just carried on milk, apples, paper towels, the world might stay ordinary. At the checkout, I inserted my card. The machine beeped once, then flashed red. Transaction declined. I tried again. The same. The cashier, a young man with kind eyes, said gently, "Maybe it's the chip, ma'am." He typed something, frowned, then said, "It says the account was closed by a joint holder." The words fell like marbles on a tile floor, cold, rolling everywhere. "Could you repeat that?" He turned the screen slightly. There it was in black text. "Account closed by joint holder Ryan Brown." I thanked him, though I don't remember how I got home. My key blinked red in the door. The smart lock had been reprogrammed. I pressed again. Red. Again. Red. A white envelope sat under the flower pot. The same careful font. Inside, a single printed note. "Please respect our privacy during this time. Contact will be initiated when appropriate." Below it, Ryan's signature, quick, impersonal, like the scrawl on school permission slips I used to sign for him. The street smelled of rain on warm pavement. Across the yard, my hydrangeas, the ones Caitlin's landscaper had trimmed into perfect spheres, stood too neat, like sentries witnessing the eviction. I sat on the porch step with the grocery bag beside me. Milk sweating, apples bruising one another in silence. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I just looked at the window where Lily's curtains fluttered, pale pink, dotted with stars. I thought of her waking up, looking for me, and hearing, "Grandma's resting somewhere else for a while." The cake box still sat where I'd left it the night before, near the recycling bin. The frosting had softened, sliding toward the edges. The candles, unlit, leaned as though tired of waiting for a wish that wouldn't come. I picked up the box, removed the lid, and placed it on the porch railing. The rain started again, slow then steadier. Drops blurred the letters on the box, pink sugar dissolving into streaks. I whispered, mostly to myself, "So this is how it ends." For years I had believed loyalty was repayment enough, that sacrifice, once given, circled back eventually. But standing there with rain threading through my hair, and the smell of wet cardboard around me, I understood something different. Love can turn into obligation so quietly you don't hear the hinge close. I left the cake there, took one last look at the window, no faces, no silhouettes, and walked down the driveway. My steps felt light, almost detached. Each one erased a little of the woman who waited for permission to exist. At the corner I turned back once. A delivery truck slowed in front of the house. The driver stepped out holding a clipboard. "You moving?" he called. I looked at him, then at the house. "Seems so," I said. I walked on. No suitcase, no plan, just my purse and the steady awareness that everything I had built, every bedtime story, every loan, every gentle compromise, had been rewritten without me. By the time I reached the old oak at the end of the street, the rain had stopped. The air smelled faintly of earth and betrayal, clean, almost forgiving. I waited for grief to crash through me. But instead there was only a strange, wide quiet. Maybe shock. Maybe the beginning of freedom. I thought of all the times Ryan had said, "Mom, you worry too much," and how I had smiled to keep peace. How many moments I dismissed as small when they were warnings. How easily affection can become leverage when you've raised someone who knows exactly how much you'll give. I didn't feel angry, not yet. Anger still requires belief in fairness. What I felt was finality, like a door closing softly on a house you once loved but no longer live in. I kept walking until the streetlights blinked on. My shoes left small prints on the damp pavement, proof at least that I still occupied the earth even if I no longer occupied my home. Somewhere behind me the porch light turned off. That was the moment I stopped being a mother waiting for reconciliation and became a woman remembering her worth. I didn't knock. I didn't plead. I sat on the bus bench by the pharmacy with the damp grocery bag at my feet and let one clean thought arrive. If they could close a door so easily, they had practiced. The rain left a dark strip on my hem. I opened the bank app. Spun, then let me in. The checking account once called household now read family ops. Balance $0. 00 with a gray note. Account closed by authorized user. In history, 3 weeks of transfers marched backward. Utilities, a landscaping retainer, small test charges to a moving company I didn't recognize, then a final sweep to an account ending in numbers I'd never seen. Under account owners, my name was gone. I stared at the sidewalk until the concrete steadied. Then email. A folder I hadn't created sat near the top, transition. Inside were threads Ryan once copied me on. The most recent subject line: locksmith confirmation, smart access deactivation. The body was cheerful. Hi Ryan, confirming code rotation on April 29th at 9 a.m. New fobs available. Old fobs decommissioned. A PDF sat attached. A diagram of our door. Another thread. Joint account changes. The banker wrote, as discussed, closure can be executed by any named holder. Given family privacy concerns, consolidate to one active account. Timestamp: April 15th, 2:41 p.m. That afternoon I had Lily at the marsh catching tadpoles. While we laughed at bubbles, my name was being erased. No tears came. Instead, a soft click of truth slid into place, like a drawer finding its runners. I checked the shared calendar. Family reset celebration plan. Guests, 2 names and a star for Lily. Location: den phones off. Notes: keep it calm. Use neutral language. Emphasize independence. They had a script down to tone. I scrolled to the top of my texts with Ryan. June 1st, 2021 marked the transfer of $42,000. His words: you saved us. We'll always keep a room for you. My reply: I trust you. I copied those 3 words into a new note and stared until the screen dimmed. I let the bus pass and opened photos. In Harbor Lane, the house repeated by seasons. In one, my armchair glowed by the window, the chipped blue mug beside it. It wasn't furniture. It was proof that I once occupied space without apology. I needed a table and quiet. I walked to the library. At a corral I laid out phone, wallet, the envelope labeled guest stay concluded. I borrowed a pencil and a ruled pad like before hard parent meetings. Headings formed a map: what happened, when it began, what I know, what I can prove. Under what happened, I wrote dates. April 29th, lock changed, card declined. April 15th, bank permission toggled. April 9th, Wi-Fi reset. Under when it began, the mailbox, the tape, the chair. Under what I know, promises are not contracts. Kindness is not consent. Under what I can prove, one word, deed. The word tugged a thread. Michael's lawyer. The yellow folder. I searched contacts. Henderson, Michael, attorney. I had kept the number after he died. I tapped. A receptionist answered. Then his voice, thinner but steady. I still have your file, he said. Michael deeded Harbor Lane to you in 1997. Life estate remainder to you. No mortgage. It's yours. Heir returned. I'd like a copy. Of course, he said then. Are you safe? Yes, I answered and discovered it was true. Sometimes safety begins with a line on paper. We agreed I would stop by before closing. I printed the emails, logged out, returned the pencil. At the community board, a flyer offered a room near the marina. Another offered rides. I tore off 2 tabs and tucked them into my wallet. Options exist. So, outside, the sidewalk shone. I carried the cake to a trash bin and set it gently on top, a small funeral for an old roll. I kept the candles. A text from Ryan arrived. Let's give it space. We'll text when appropriate. No apology. I archived the thread. At Mr. Henderson's office, the lobby floor gleamed. He met me with the yellow folder. The deed felt cool and certain. My name appeared alone, unshared. He pointed to the transfer line, the tax stamp, the notary seal from a summer when I thought houses lasted forever. Back in the sun, the folder's edge tapped my wrist like a teacher's quiet signal. Pay attention. I paid attention. The story I'd been fed, that I was an intrusion, had been written to disguise a simpler truth. I was the owner they preferred to forget. I didn't plan speeches. Silence could work for me now, the way time and paperwork. I walked to the bus stop with the folder under my arm and the ruled page in my bag. The steadiness you feel when you stop asking to be believed and start believing yourself. At home I had collected evidence for others, late slips, progress charts, meeting notes so they could course correct. Today the evidence was for me. It said, you are not a guest. It said, you can draw a boundary without raising your voice. It said, proceed. Across the street, a child wobbled on a bicycle, then found the line and glided. His mother jogged beside him with a hand near his back but not touching. I recognized the balance already there. The bus rounded the corner. I boarded and sat by the window. The folder rested on my lap, warm from sun. I looked out at familiar blocks and let myself imagine a next address. Not revenge, not flight, simply motion that belonged to me. My phone face down vibrated once. I didn't check it. I slid the 3 saved candles into my pocket notebook like bookmarks for the life ahead and closed my eyes. The bus hummed. The city moved. I moved with it, quietly awake to the fact that the person I needed permission from was the one holding this folder. I rang the bell 2 stops early and felt the paper shift against my ribs. Not heavy. Defining. I stepped down and turned toward the work that would follow. Calls to make, forms to sign, a key to reclaim. No rush. No drama. Only a clear path drawn in ink. I started walking. With each step, the old story loosened like a knot. Not by force, but by patience and truth I was finally willing to name. When I woke the next morning, the city was wrapped in fog. That thick Charleston kind that hides the horizon and makes the world sound hushed, unfinished. I boiled water, made tea in my chipped blue mug, and placed the yellow folder beside it on the table. The paper smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil, law office air. My husband's handwriting still marked the corner. D. 1997. For 26 years, I'd thought of that folder as proof of security, not as a weapon. I had filed it under peace of mind, not evidence. But now, peace required action. At 9:02 a.m., I called Mr. Henderson. I'd like to proceed, I said. He paused. Proceed in what way? Sell the property. Quietly. I don't want contact with the current occupants until the process is complete. A long exhale followed. Understood, he said finally. You own it outright. You may do as you wish. It took 2 days to gather what I needed. The deed, a copy of the property tax statement, and the photographs for the listing. I asked the agent to use the old images, the bright ones, from before Caitlin's white blinds and matching furniture drained the life out of every room. List it as a family home with character, I said. When she asked about access for showings, I smiled. You'll have the keys by next week. The law allows an owner to reclaim possession when a tenant, even an informal one, refuses to leave after written notice. Henderson handled that part. The letter went out by courier, neutral tone, clear terms. The property at Harbor Lane will be sold. Please vacate within 30 days. I didn't sign it in ink. I signed it digitally, the way people sign things now, no flourish, no emotion, just a timestamp that read May 4, 2023, 8:47 a.m. By afternoon, Ryan called. I let it ring out. The voicemail was short. Mom, what is this? We got a letter. You can't just, this has to be a mistake. I listened once, deleted it, and called Henderson to confirm receipt. They've been served, he said. His voice held no triumph, only the steadiness of a man who's seen too many families unravel on letterhead. That night I slept for 7 full hours. First time in months. Over the following week there were messages, some angry, some pleading. Caitlin sent one that began with "For Lily's sake." I stopped reading after the first line. I wasn't punishing a child. I was protecting a woman who had been erased in her own house. When the realtor called to schedule an inspection, I arranged for the locksmith to meet her. Change everything, I told him. Doors, code, mailbox. every lock that opens a door to that house. The morning of the inspection, I stood across the street, wearing a simple beige coat, the same one I used for recess duty back when I taught. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The hydrangeas, still trimmed into perfect helmets, lined the path. A moving truck idled in the drive, its side door rolled up. Through the windshield I saw Ryan's silhouette, shoulders slumped, phone pressed to his ear. I didn't wave. He didn't see me. At 2:15 p.m. Henderson texted. Notice acknowledged. Vacating confirmed. By sunset, the house belonged to no one emotionally, only legally. A listing. A parcel. Coordinates on paper. For 3 weeks the process ran on rails. Appraisals, signatures, offers. Each document I signed felt like a small reclamation of breath. When the sale closed, the funds appeared in my account. $412,000 after fees. I stared at the number until it blurred, remembering the zeros I'd given away before, the promises attached to them. I didn't send an announcement. Silence, I'd learned, carries its own precision. A single text arrived the night before closing from Ryan's old number. Mom, please. We'll lose everything. I typed slowly, each word deliberate. I gave you that house once. You gave me a guest room. I'm taking back what was mine. Then I set the phone down, turned it face down, and walked to the porch. The air smelled of magnolia and salt. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime trembled. Inside, the kettle began to whistle. I poured another cup of tea the way I always had, steady and careful. For the first time it didn't taste of fear or apology, just warmth. The next morning I went to the bank. The teller smiled, asked if I wanted to open a new savings account. For a goal, maybe, she said. I thought for a moment, then replied, yes, for rebuilding. When she slid the paperwork across the counter, I noticed the timestamp again. June 1st, 2023, 10:12 a.m. Exactly 2 years to the day after I transferred that $42,000 to Ryan. The circle closed neatly, without shouting, without spectacle. Only numbers balancing themselves, just as disguised as arithmetic. On my way out, I withdrew $300 in cash, fresh bills that smelled faintly of ink and promise, and caught the bus toward the coast. I watched the neighborhoods blur. Old brick homes, grocery stores, small children chasing bubbles in yards. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that for a lifetime. When I stepped off at the stop near the sea, the air felt wider. I walked until I found a small cottage with a hand-painted sign. For rent, short or long term. The porch rail was peeling. The view beyond it was all horizon. I called the number. A woman answered, her voice calm and curious. Is it still available? I asked. It is, she said. Would you like to see it today? Yes, I said. Today would be good. As I waited, I looked out at the water. The tide moved in slow, certain rhythms. No permission asked, no explanation given. I realized then that freedom isn't loud. It's procedural. It's a form filled out correctly, a signature made in your own hand, a quiet reclaiming of space once surrendered. And for the first time in a long while I felt at home, not in a house but in my own decisions. 3 weeks after the sale closed, I received an envelope forwarded from Mr. Henderson's office. Inside were 2 letters. One typed, one handwritten. The typed one was from Ryan. Mom, I don't understand how you could do this. We had a plan. I was trying to stabilize our finances. You've put us in an impossible position. We can't stay in Charleston now. Lily's school year will be disrupted. Caitlin says she can't face you. I wish you'd talk to me first. There was no apology, only rearranged guilt. He wanted to sound injured, but the spaces between the words told the truth. He'd assumed my silence meant surrender. The handwritten one was from Caitlin, written in her careful loops. Eleanor, I hope someday you'll realize how much this has hurt Lily. She adored you. I wanted her to have a calm home, and your actions have made that impossible. We'll rebuild, but the damage you caused will linger. No signature. Just a flourish at the bottom like the tail of a snake. I folded both letters once and set them in the drawer with the utility receipts for my new cottage. Paper belongs with paper. I refused to store sorrow anywhere near my heart again. By July, I learned through a neighbor that Ryan and Caitlin were renting a 2-bedroom apartment in North Augusta. The complex had a shared laundry room and a balcony facing a parking lot. The neighbor said she'd seen a moving van at dawn and a pink tricycle balanced awkwardly on the truck's edge. It was not triumph I felt, but proportion. Life had simply recalibrated. Ryan called once more in late July. His voice was different, quieter, slower. "Mom, I just wanted you to know we're managing. It's tight, but we'll be fine." I waited. Sometimes silence invites truth. He added, "I shouldn't have handled things the way I did." Caitlin thought. His words thinned. "Anyway, we're figuring things out," I said. "I hope you do." He tried again. "Lily misses you. Tell her I think of her every day." Then after a pause he whispered, "You really sold it." "Yes," I said. "I really did." He didn't hang up right away, but there was nothing left to rescue between us. When the line finally clicked, I let out a long breath I hadn't known I was holding. A week later, a mutual acquaintance sent me a photo from a local paper. Real estate listings under recently sold. There was the house on Harbor Lane captioned, "Charming coastal property, sold June 2023 for $415,000. The new owners, a retired couple from Asheville, had painted the shutters pale blue. The hydrangeas were already softening back into wildness. Caitlin posted nothing about it online. Her social media accounts, once filled with bright kitchen shots and captions about gratitude, went private. Ryan's LinkedIn showed a new position in transition. Their story receded like a tide that had carried too much debris. For me, the weeks unfolded quietly. I furnished my cottage one piece at a time: second-hand shelves, a small desk by the window, a kettle that whistled in a different tone but still kept me company. I planted basil in a clay pot and watched it lean toward the sun. Occasionally, an envelope still came addressed to the Browns. I returned it unopened, marking each one, "No longer at this address." The phrase satisfied me. It was factual and final, not bitter. In August, I received a postcard from an unknown sender. The handwriting was unfamiliar, looping and earnest. "Dear Ms. Brown, I'm the new owner of the Harbor Lane home. We found a small box in the attic labeled Eleanor. It looked personal. Please let me know where to send it." The return address was simple: W&M, Garrison, Savannah, Georgia. I wrote back the same day. A week later, the package arrived. Inside were two things: the blue mug, carefully wrapped, and a photograph I hadn't seen in years. Ryan at 12, holding his science fair ribbon, Michael standing beside him, proud and young. I set the photo on my new mantle and the mug beside it. Neither belonged to the past or the future. They were just reminders of endurance. The mug became my morning ritual again. Tea at sunrise, sea salt in the air, the distant sound of gulls. Sometimes, when the light slanted just right through the window, I would picture the other kitchen, the white walls, the labeled shelves, the perfectly trimmed hydrangeas, and wonder if they missed the warmth they'd stripped away. But I didn't dwell. Some lessons belonged to those who created them. In September, I learned from an old colleague that Ryan had reached out about a reference. He said he might go back to school for teaching, she told me, surprised. I smiled at that. Perhaps life had decided to teach him in turn. I didn't interfere. I simply wished him patience, the kind that recognizes what people are worth before it's too late. Autumn came. The sea turned darker, more honest. The basil on the sill grew woody, stubborn. On my walks, I began noticing the faces of women my age, at the pier, at the market, each carrying her own story of giving and losing, staying and leaving. We'd nod to one another, small gestures of recognition. One evening, I lit 3 candles, the ones I'd saved from Lily's unlit cake, and let them burn down together. The wax pooled into a single shape, impossible to separate. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. Justice had already been done, not through anger or revenge, but through the simple, steady work of boundaries. When I blew the candles out, the smoke curled upward, thin and graceful, until it disappeared into the dark ceiling. For the first time in years, the house smelled like peace. The first real morning of peace came quietly, without ceremony. I woke before sunrise to the sound of waves shuffling against the shore, and the scent of coffee drifting through my small kitchen. I had left the window open overnight, and the curtain breathed in and out like a slow, sleeping thing. I sat at my little pine table, the one I'd sanded myself, and let the light build slowly over the water. It was the beginning of my new routine. Every day I wrote for an hour before breakfast. Not letters or lists, but small pieces of memory, lessons I'd learned through endurance, phrases I wanted to hand down to no one in particular. Words for women like me, who had given everything they could and then been told they'd given too much. I titled the notebook Harbor Home. At first I didn't know why, but the phrase kept returning. A harbor is not a final place. It's a pause, a shelter, a waiting ground. That's what I was building now. A harbor for women who needed time to remember themselves. It began almost accidentally. Ruth, a retired nurse from Beaufort, stopped by one afternoon after hearing from a neighbor that I had space to rent. She needed a room for a month while her daughter's house was being remodeled. She arrived with 2 suitcases and the polite caution of someone who'd been disappointed too often. I told her, "You can stay as long as you like. We'll take things day by day." By the end of the week, we were sharing evening walks along the beach, trading stories in the soft half-light. She told me about her son who hadn't called in a year. I told her about a birthday cake I never lit. The stories sounded different but carried the same weight. Word spread the way quiet truths do, slowly without advertising. Margie, a retired teacher like me, came next, followed by Judith, a widow learning how to live without a map. Each woman left behind a different kind of silence, and together we learned to fill it. We didn't have a grand mission statement. There were no rules except respect and gentleness. Every morning the house smelled of coffee and toast. The radio played low, the ocean speaking beneath it. We cooked together, painted the porch rail white, planted herbs that actually thrived. Ruth hung a small sign by the door, "Welcome to Harbor Home." Sometimes I still thought about Ryan. The human mind is stubborn that way, it circles what it hasn't resolved. In October, a card arrived with his handwriting on the envelope. No return address, just my name in uneven blue ink. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I've been working part-time at a community center. Lily's in 1st grade now. She asks about you often. I'd like to bring her by sometime if you'll allow it." I read it twice, then placed it between the pages of Harbor Home, right after the entry that said, "Forgiveness is not a doorway. It's a window you can open when you're ready to breathe." I didn't write back immediately. I needed to think, not about anger but about balance. There's a point where protecting yourself and punishing someone can look almost the same from the outside. I didn't want to live in punishment. By winter, Harbor Home had become a gentle rhythm of companionship and renewal. We cooked gumbo on Sundays, read to each other from old novels, and laughed about the small indignities of age. The squeak of knees, the memory slips, the way we still turned to listen for voices that no longer lived in our houses. On Christmas Eve, I lit 3 candles again, the same ones from the birthday cake, now shortened but still sturdy. I placed them by the window so their glow reached the path. I didn't invite anyone. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted the house to feel alive. At midnight, I stepped onto the porch. The sea stretched dark and endless, a kind of mercy in motion. The stars scattered above like small promises. For the first time, I felt entirely unafraid of tomorrow. In January, Ryan and Lily came. They parked by the fence and Lily ran ahead, her hair longer now, her laugh still exactly as I remembered. She carried a seashell in one hand. "Grandma," she called. The word sounded both fragile and whole. Ryan followed slower. He looked older, humbled. When he reached the porch steps, he stopped. "Is this your place?" "Yes," I said. "It's home." He nodded, hands deep in his pockets. "It's beautiful." We didn't rehash the past. Some stories lose their meaning when you repeat them too often. We just sat on the porch while Lily gathered shells by the waterline. I poured tea into 2 chipped mugs, the blue one and another I'd found at a thrift store that almost matched. Ryan said softly, "Thank you for seeing us." "I didn't say yes before," I replied. "But I never said no." He looked out at the horizon where the sea met the pale sky. "I think I understand that now." When they left that afternoon, Lily hugged me twice, once quick, once lingering. Ryan said he'd write again soon. I believed him, not because of his words, but because of the quiet way he looked back at the house before driving away. Now, each morning when I open the curtains, the sea greets me with the same patience it always had. The house hums with life. Ruth humming in the kitchen, Margie watering herbs, Judith writing postcards to no one in particular. I've learned that coming home isn't about reclaiming walls or furniture. It's about reclaiming peace inside your own skin. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family, remember this. The moment you choose yourself, you stop being a visitor. You become the owner of your own story. And if this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength. Because sometimes walking away isn't leaving. It's arriving. Peace came to me quietly, almost shyly, like a long-lost friend who wasn't sure she'd be welcome. I didn't chase it. I simply stopped standing in its way. The sea taught me that how it keeps moving, no matter what's been built or broken along its shore. Some mornings I walk barefoot along the sand, leaving shallow footprints that the tide erases before I can turn back. There's comfort in that kind of disappearance. It means I don't need to be remembered to have mattered. Ryan still writes. His words are smaller now, careful. We're learning, he said in his last letter. Lily's growing fast. She talks about the beach, about you. I read his messages once, maybe twice, and then I fold them away. I don't carry them like proof or punishment, just as reminders that endings aren't always cruel. Sometimes they're just pauses between the right chapters. At Harbor Home, our little circle of women grows. Ruth teaches yoga on the porch now. Margie paints the sunrise every week, swearing it never looks the same twice. Judith bakes bread that smells like memory. I keep the kettle going and the doors open. Some nights we sit together in the living room with the lamps low and the radio soft, the silence between songs gentle and alive. We've learned that what we share isn't grief, it's recognition. Each of us was once the background character in someone else's story. Here we've become the authors. I often think about that final night at Harbor Lane. The cake growing heavy in my hands, the candles flickering against a room that no longer wanted me. I used to replay it with pain. Now I see it differently. That was the moment life handed me the match instead of the cake. The choice to stop waiting for permission and light my own way forward. If you've ever been told you're too much, or made to feel like a guest in your own life, listen carefully. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to take back what you built, to draw lines where love once blurred them. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs a document, packs a bag, and walks toward the sea. So here I am, 67 and unafraid. A woman who learned that dignity is not a gift. It's a decision renewed every morning. And if my story touched something in you, stay close. Subscribe, share, or simply sit with me in this quiet truth. Because this isn't just my story. It's every mother's story. The kind that begins with love, bends through betrayal, and ends not in bitterness but in peace. And peace, my dear, is the sweetest homecoming there is.